Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Universities at Shady Grove Industry Roundtable. Our focus today is on entrepreneurship as a key to unlocking economic recovery. I'm Ann Kademian, the Executive Director of the Universities at Shady Grove, or USG. USG is Maryland's largest regional higher educational center, celebrating 20 years in the Montgomery County region. USG is the Montgomery County home to 9 universities on one campus, or as we like to say here, 9 universities, 1 campus, and great results. Our 9 educational partners offer a combination of academic programs from undergraduate to graduate degrees, graduate certificate programs, and we recently piloted a biotech boot camp, which was focused on intensive hands-on training in basic biotech techniques here at USG in partnership with UMBC, WorkSource Montgomery, and Montgomery College. I'd like to recognize and thank our industry partners for promoting the USG Industry Roundtable today. The Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce, the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce, with a special welcome to Allie Williams, who's the new president of that chamber, and Rockville Economic Development, Inc. as well. Thank you all for your support. Before I introduce our roundtable host for this evening, I'd also like to thank the founding director of entrepreneurship at USG, Mark Starren, USG's chief advancement officer, Richie Smith Andrews, John Zucknick, who is the director of economic development and workforce initiatives, and the many members of the USG team for their great work organizing this event, and to our academic partners and students who helped to promote the event and who are attending today as well. Please note that this event will be recorded. This afternoon, we have several remarkable industry leaders that promise to provide thought-provoking insight on how entrepreneurship will play a key role in our economic recovery. Now, I'd like to introduce our host for the USG Industry Roundtable. Mr. David Blair is the executive chairman of Accountable Health, Inc., a healthcare services company that develops technology solutions in the delivery of healthcare. He's also the founder of Council for Advocacy and Policy Solutions, a nonprofit organization that bridges the gap of community and politics. In 2013, he became a partner with Monumental Sports and Entertainment, an integrated sports and entertainment company that owns some of Washington, D.C.'s premier sports teams. From 1999 to 2012, David served as Chief Executive Officer of Catalyst Health Solutions, Inc., a highly successful pharmacy benefit management organization. His leadership was recognized with numerous awards. At USG, David is a member of the Board of Advisors, and he is the founding partner of the Lab for Entrepreneurship and Transformational Leadership to advance students, entrepreneurs, and small business owners in Montgomery County by bringing together educational and economic innovation. David's vision for the entrepreneurial mindset has infused the work of the lab and is inspiring our thinking here at USG, a drive and a determination to solve problems through creativity, authenticity, and innovation, whether building a business or working to address the social and economic challenges all around us. We hope today's event inspires and informs the entrepreneur in all of us. David, welcome, and thank you for hosting today's event.
Thank you, Ann. Good afternoon, and welcome to our entrepreneurial roundtable discussion. Clearly, I'm thrilled to be joining you and hosting our panel discussion with 3 incredibly successful entrepreneurs. It was 2 years ago when the leadership team at the Universities of Shady Grove and I sat down and we contemplated an entrepreneurship lab. And we envisioned events just like this afternoon's discussion. So why an entrepreneurship lab? Startup businesses account for virtually all net new job growth. Let me say that again. Startup businesses account for virtually all net new job growth. You see, big companies tend to grow more by either gobbling up smaller companies or candidly putting smaller companies out of business. So it's imperative that we do everything we can to promote entrepreneurship. And nowhere is that more true than here in Montgomery County. In fact, new business and job growth in Montgomery County has lagged behind surrounding jurisdictions. Over the past 10 years, Montgomery County has actually realized a decrease of private sector jobs. So clearly this negative trend needs to reverse, and promoting entrepreneurship is a critical first step. Our lab provides resources to students and empowers local entrepreneurs. Our offerings include classes, lab space, competitions, hackathons, as well as our speaker series. While the leadership team at USG and I envisioned the lab, it was Mark Starin, our founding director, that has brought it to life. And without Mark, this would still be just an idea. So Mark, who's joining us today, I offer you a heartfelt thank you for bringing this incredible resource to our community. Okay, let's get started. And our timing for this afternoon's discussion could not be more timely, fortunate. As we are all well aware, over the past year, our nation has been rocked by the pandemic, with record numbers of unemployment, tens of thousands of businesses closed. Our way of living has changed, and in many respects will never return to, quote, normal. Whether it's how we think about traditional office space, working from home, Zoom calls, telehealth, you name it. So many facets of our life have fundamentally changed. However, with change comes opportunity for new businesses. So with that as a backdrop, joining us today, we have Talia Fox, CEO of KUSI Global, Congressman David Trone, founder of Total Wine & More, and Tim Chi, CEO of Not Worldwide. Thank you for joining us. To our audience, if you have questions, please type them in the chat room, and we will get to them towards the back half of our conversation today. Let me start by asking each one of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and sharing with us your aha moment when you made the leap to becoming an entrepreneur. Tim, would you like to lead us off?
Sure. Thanks, David. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name's Tim. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Not Worldwide, easiest way to think about it, we're a global leader in all things weddings. So chances are, if you're getting married or got married in one of the 16 countries that we serve, you've probably used one of our properties or apps to plan your big day. In the US, we're most well known for a brand called The Knot and Wedding Wire. We have two popular wedding brands in the US. We have about 1,800 employees worldwide today, offices in 8 countries, but that's where we are today. David, to answer your question, in terms of how I got started, I've had 2 aha moments as an entrepreneur. The first was in college when I went to school in upstate New York. It was very cold there all the time. And this was in the late 90s. I'm dating myself, but colleges and universities had laid a ton of infrastructure in connecting dorm rooms. Long story short, we co-founded a company there that ended up becoming a company called Blackboard, an e-education company that was based here in Washington, D.C., powered much of what we see today in terms of virtual learning and is still used by colleges and universities and school districts worldwide. Well, I left Blackboard in 2004, and this is my second aha moment. We took it public in 2004, and I just happened to be engaged at the time, and that is what led me to start Wedding Wire, one of the brands that we own today at the Not Worldwide. I was engaged, felt strongly there was a gap in terms of how engaged couples were planning weddings. I started Wedding Wire in my living room here in Chevy Chase, Maryland, with 3 other co-founders. 4 guys knowing nothing really about anything for the wedding industries. 15 years later, we're still driving towards our vision here of helping every couple in the world plan a wedding that's uniquely their own. So I guess you could say that's a success or failure, depending on how you look at it. Wedding planning is still stressful and frustrating, so we definitely have more work to do. I live in Maryland, still married to my wife, and in my very limited free time when I'm not chasing my kids around, I love to play video games. So that's a little bit about me.
Great, thank you, Talia, or thank you, Tim. Talia, would like to go next?
Great, thank you, David, and thank you, Tim. I love stories about the birth of an idea, how it just starts in the living room. I feel like so many great ideas start there. I am the CEO, as you mentioned, of KUSI Global, so it's KUSI. It stands for Knowledge, Understanding, Strategy, Implementation. And what we do is we go into organizations and we transform cultures. We work with lots of organizations to help leaders think about what they can do differently to sort of help missions that matter. I have a couple of aha moments. I actually have been an entrepreneur my entire life. My father, which I recently discovered was illiterate my entire life, he opened up the Mirage Hotel and Casino as a reggae artist in Las Vegas. And when I was 8 years old, I had to read all of his contracts, which I realized it's because he could not read. So I negotiated all of his deals as a reggae artist starting at 8 years old. He had a very, very thick accent. I had to speak on his behalf because people did not understand him. So that's how I kind of started this journey. And then it turned into two very interesting life sort of forks in the road for me. One is a self-centered aha moment. Another is a service-centered aha moment. The self-centered aha moment is I became a single mom and I had a very colicky baby, and it just broke my heart that I'd be going to work every day. And every time I had to call in sick, my integrity was questioned. And I said, there's got to be another way. There's got to be freedom. And so I thought about what would it be to do my own thing. The service-centered is that I really helped many children in the DC area that were impacted by HIV and AIDS. And I got to witness how leaders, the decisions that they make, the strategies that they implement, how it impacts people, how it impacts lives. And sometimes we're so disconnected from what people are experiencing and we don't understand how our choices impact. So I started this entire firm where we first hired many mothers that could work from home and work for our company. Some of those mothers had special needs children. And we said, we are going to build a firm to train leaders and to train organizations how to treat people and how to know and discover what we can do to both protect the bottom line, but also to protect people. So I wanted some freedom. I wanted some success to maximize my potential, but I also wanted to serve and do something that's meaningful. And that is how we kind of gave birth to Kusai Global. So I am just so honored to be here with the rest of this panel. Always great to have conversations with leaders that care about what matters and care about giving back. So thank you so much, David. And thank you again, Tim.
Talia, thank you. And Congressman Trone, will you not only maybe give us an introduction, but also we'd love to hear about your aha moment and when you decided to start Total Wine and More.
That's great. David, thanks for putting this on today. And I want to also thank all the whole USG team. I've been over the university many times, and what a great university. And so, Ann, it's great to meet you. And John, Mark Starron, it's good to see you folks again, and happy to be able to partner with you. I would say I've had a couple of aha moments, and I grew up on a farm, and unfortunately, after college, my dad went bankrupt, and we lost our farm, and I went to grad school on student loans, and I started brokering eggs, and as I kind of never worked for anybody my whole life but my father, and unfortunately, after about a year of brokering eggs, from the Wharton School of Business, my chickens caught the avian flu and were all eradicated. And so I was no longer able to broker, and I was out of business again with two failures kind of in a row. So I looked around for a business that was not real competitive and backward, and I found the wine, beer, spirit business, which at that point was just beer in Pennsylvania, and started and built my first store literally out of 2x4s. We built the cash registers. We built the cooler out of plywood. We painted a sign on the wall, and it was a total bootstrap operation. And the key focus always for us has been looking for entrepreneurs that work with us that really, are not afraid of ideas, that want to leave the beaten path and go be contrarian. I love contrarian. I love disruptors. So that's kind of how we've grown the business today. Total Wine's a whole different company than it was back 3 decades ago. We now have about 11,000 team members. I operate in 27 states. Last year, we hit $5 billion in sales. So it's been a long journey, from the first store. But the concept is big box, price like Costco, selection better than anybody, service like Nordstrom, and then an ambience kind of like Whole Foods. So if you put those together, you've got a winning entrepreneurial combination. So, but the other aha moment was when we went and said, hey, we've made this, it worked. but how do I give back more to my community? And that's where we saw the opportunity to run for Congress and really focus on the things that folks that don't have a voice. So what I work on here is addiction, mental health, criminal justice, all three completely intertwined. I've been working with the ACLU for over 20 years on criminal justice, and it's a way to take our philanthropy and move it into the public sector and use our time, and then also medical research. So those are the four areas that we're really focused on. So I'm excited to be here today, and I'm looking forward to answering questions.
Great, thank you, Congressman. And just as a reminder, if you have questions, please feel free to type those into the chat room. So Tim, let me just start with you. I was certainly inspired by how you started Wedding Wire. It was from a personal observation that you made. I'm curious, what are some of the business sectors that you see now that are promising for entrepreneurs?
Sure, David. So, it's an interesting question because there's been so many massive shifts and disruption just due to the pandemic. And we've seen, a lot of beneficiaries and a lot of industries become hard hit because of that. For myself, I'm bullish, in particularly two areas. I think number one, thematically, any industry where tech enablement is driving more rapid innovation or potential for disruption. I think we've seen that COVID has rapidly accelerated a lot of these offline to online behavioral shifts, probably by a few years, and they're here to stay. This can be anything from home grocery delivery to on-demand, theater quality content to biotech to energy more. So it's just, to me, it's really clear there's many parts of the traditional value chains for large industries where when you pick them apart, you may have opportunities for entrepreneurs to drive innovation there. And then the second theme for me that has stood out, this one's a little more personal, is just this real rush towards ESG, sort of environmental social governance, appearing as a more prominent thing that companies care about or will have to care about. More and more companies are asking themselves how they can commit to sustainability, looking really hard at corporate governance structure. They're looking at how their relationships with employees, suppliers, the local communities are impacted. And so I just love that a lot of the capital allocators, mutual funds, brokerage firms, et cetera, are starting to factor ESG into their criteria for where they place money. So to me, those types of themes sound like opportunities for entrepreneurs. The one thing that I did want to mention, though, too, is more important to me as an entrepreneur than sector is what you as an entrepreneur is most passionate about. It's what a gift it is as a startup entrepreneur to be able to have an opportunity to overlap business opportunities with what you're passionate about. Like if you can make that Venn diagram overlap as much as possible, that's a really cool thing in the early days of startup. In the early days of startup, it's passion, it's commitment, it's resiliency, it's dreaming in color all the time that are really going to get you all of those over those humps. So for me, that's really one of the most special things about being a startup entrepreneur.
Thank you. So Talia, I'll switch gears and ask you a question. So clearly, as someone who has trained thousands of business leaders, when we think about startups, how do you think about building a team? What kind of talent are you looking for that's essential for successful startups?
Yeah, it's a really good question because the game is changing, right? So I think the first step is we really need to develop this skill that what do we do when we don't know what to do, right? So there is a skill called systems thinking that many people have probably heard about, which the skill is that you have to be willing to try something and to take a risk, but be willing to pivot and watch the feedback that you get from that risk. So my perspective, there's two ways to build a business. You can build from the top down or the bottom up. So a lot of new entrepreneurs, because they're overwhelmed, they start with support, right? Administrative support, they need to get the work done. And then as you build and as you grow, you get more strategic thinkers. And maybe, as you get even bigger, you want to get a chief technology officer. You may have to find a different strategy. The work is very important and you have to sort of be able to deliver or to create a product. So you need people on the ground to do the work. But you may have to figure out a strategy to get your thinkers involved. You need strategic thinkers during this time, people that can disrupt, people that can support you with change and with pivots. It's going to be very, very critical. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. You don't have to hire a full-time person. Where can you get your consultants? Where can you get your mentors to play a role in checking in on what those pivots need to be? So I think that the game is completely changing, and we're going to see some very creative and non-traditional ways of how people are building teams. And just to sort of to wrap this a nice bow on this. So on a team, you need someone, of course, to help do really good quality work. You need a disruptive technology type thinker that can drive the wave. And then you need a leader that's really thinking about the people, the process, and any of the challenges that you may go through. So those three sort of mindsets are going to be critical to have on the team.
Yeah, could I add to that, David?
Yep, yeah, please do, because I can't think of a bigger pivot from a chicken farm to a beer store. So I think you are a subject matter expert on this. So yeah, fire away.
And to the Appropriations Committee. But seriously, I think what Ty talked about was dead on. I mean, we really bottom up is how I got here, and making money at one store before I built the second, before I built the third. And let me tell you, it went slow for a long time. You know, 1 year now I built 25 stores in a year. I'll build 17 next year. So we were able to really double literally every 5 years for the last 30 years. And so but it starts slow. But the key on hiring is every year when I look at my budget planning, I want to start with HR. That's what I love to do, because HR is my most important asset, my people, my team. So I want to make sure I've got enough people and the right people. And I've got to make sure we see the vision. We know the small steps we're going to take together as a team to get to that vision. And then we can execute with excellence. But at the same time, we've got to keep weeding out mediocrity. We can't accept mediocrity or we'll become mediocre. But as far as the workers go, I want the best athlete. I always want to hire smart. And that means probably costs more. But as you get bigger, you can afford that. But always hire smart. You can teach them the skills of your business later. And then the winners just outwork everybody. That's simple. I mean, I know young people hate to hear that sometimes, but if you outwork everybody, you're going to win at the end of the day. And that certainly worked for me.
Great, thank you. And so Congressman, let's just stay with you for a second, because you have clearly an incredibly unique perspective as both an entrepreneur and as now a member of Congress. And connecting a dot that Tim said earlier about some of the societal challenges that we're facing, how can, as we're thinking about entrepreneurship and starting new businesses, how can our entrepreneurs address some of those society problems that we're facing as a country?
Well, I think that the entrepreneurs need to be part of what's going on around them. I mean, for example, I'm very passionate about criminal justice. And I think that we've got 25% of the world's prisoners. We're 4.3% of the world's population. That's wrong. 1 in 3 young men of color are going to be incarcerated. That's outrageous. That's a failure on me and everybody here. So ways we can participate as a business is things like banning the box. You know, at Total Wine, we've hired over 500 returning citizens. I have a bill with Maxine Waters now that I wrote that'll change that for the whole country. You know, Walmart has banned the box, and people deserve a second chance. And guess what? Retention rates are 14% better. So by doing right, you do better. And of course, philanthropy back into your community. You can't just drop into San Antonio or Seattle or Boston or Miami, you know, with all of my stores. I've got to be part of those communities. And that means for philanthropic efforts, we work with over 10,000 nonprofits. We got a whole team that works with nonprofits and dropped $11 million last year throughout the country to be part of those communities. And that's separate and aside from what we do with our foundation. So it's a whole different area, but that makes us part of MS, autism, Boys and Girls Clubs, everything in every city. And that gives your team a spirit to core that we're not just making money and leaving town. We're part of Tucson. We're part of Albuquerque. And I think that's really important. And it builds those people attitude. So when customers come in a store, you can tell the folks are enjoying what we're doing here, and we're all about the customer.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. So one of the questions that I get often asked is about taking in outside investor money, VC money. And Tim, I know that early in your career, you were very successful getting some strategic investors involved. How should entrepreneurs think about finding the right investors to partner with as they think about growing their businesses?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, the number one thing guiding principle for me, and it, by the way, all this is easier said than done. Finding that right partner, it's not just about the capital, right? It is about an actual partnership, and having someone by your side you're going to be in the foxhole with as you go through ups and downs growing your business. The frustrating part for raising money to me is I liken it to like dating. It's like the right funding's probably out there for you, and some people hit on it right away and some people spend a long time looking. The downside of it is, while you're fundraising an entrepreneur, you're doing exactly what you shouldn't be doing. You should be focused on growing your business, but it's kind of this necessary evil. We know cash and capital is like rocket fuel for small businesses. So I guess my advice would be three things. As an entrepreneur looking for capital, number one, lay the foundation. Build relationships early. I've had the approach that I've taken in fundraising through the various rounds. We've done everything from seed capital to large scale private equity buyouts. But knowing your investors early, right? Saying, this is who I am. This is what we're doing. We might not be the right fit for you right now, but one day, like we may come knocking on your door. That two-way exchange, though, of them giving you advice, helping you connect, I found success in building those, establishing future capital relationships early on. The second thing is time boxing your fundraise. People can, this can just drag on for a long time. I've found it a lot more successful to just say, contact all the people that you've been building relationships with and say, in the next 6 to 9 months, I'm going really, really hard. I'm going to bring in capital and then just move on. Because when you just drag it out for a long time, it can, I think, hurt your chances. And then the third piece of advice that I love to give entrepreneurs is, I feel like there's an over importance on focusing on valuation, just that headline number at the end of the day. There's so many factors that go into what makes a deal good. There's so many structural elements to fundraising beyond just the valuation number. So you really need to take all of those into consideration never let that supplant the fact that you really are trying to find the best partner that's going to help you carry things forward.
So, and Tim, I'm just curious, when did you take in outside money? How big did you get your business before you decided that you wanted outside capital?
Yeah, we took a little bit of capital to get started, like Congressman Tron. We really were let's make sure City 1 can be profitable before we go to City 2 and City 3. So it was a slower build. Having said that, we took a small amount of friends and family. Then I went to strategic fundraise for my second round. Then I went to growth equity for third, and then private equity for fourth, and then buyout for fifth. So we've kind of I've had the pleasure of seeing all the different stages. The principles around fundraising generally have stayed pretty true in terms of how to, my experience on how to do it. But it's always an effort. There's kind of no way around it.
Well, I see the other panelists nodding their heads, so I think we're in violent agreement that that's a good approach. Thank you. So maybe we could just talk a little bit about the economic recovery. And one of the things that we've all witnessed is how it's disproportionately impacted our Black and Brown communities and businesses of color. And so as we think about entrepreneurship, how can we best support ensuring that we're having an inclusive recovery? And I don't know who would like to jump in first with that. Talia, I see you clicking your mic off if you want to go first.
Yeah, thank you, David. This is a great question to follow up with what Tim was talking about, because I had two different reactions. One reaction was I said to myself, yeah, this is absolutely the right way to go in terms of building relationships, looking at your growth. And then you asked the question, When do you think it's right to take money? And so the other side of that was, what about those entrepreneurs that don't have access to capital, right? What about those entrepreneurs that don't have access to those relationships? What about those entrepreneurs that are really struggling? And we know that our system is sort of riddled with a lot of bias. So on this side is that we really need to help our Black and brown entrepreneurs get access to capital, because in entrepreneurship, innovation and disruption does not discriminate, but capital and the way our system has been built does. And so we need to sort of think of that as a strategy. With that said, what can all entrepreneurs do to support recovery? I think that we can get very creative and innovative about hiring and even if they're short-term projects during this time that you have. There is this even consulting model. People need jobs and people need resources. And so don't be afraid to sort of even do the short-term projects. Also, Congressman Trone talked about two things. He talked about not moving toward mediocre. And I think that it's very important for all the entrepreneurs to make sure that we don't have bias around what mediocre and what excellence looks like. Because I think sometimes when we're making choices about who to hire and what to do, we have these kind of preconceived notions about what that looks like. I love the expansion of being able to hire returning citizens. This idea of thinking creatively about going outside of your networks, outside of the same people that you talk to on a regular basis, and connecting with those that can support in building your business. And here's the value for you. Because, by the way, because I talk a lot about passion, people think I don't think about the bottom line, but my team will tell you. I love passion. I love all that stuff you're talking about. But if you're not making money, it's a hobby. It's not a business. So we have to talk about money. Let's just go there. But there is a business imperative. There's both a moral and business imperative to be inclusive about economic recovery, about hiring, and about entrepreneurship. The business imperative is, during this time, particularly in COVID, as you hire diversity, you expand the perspective and you expand access to new communities and new customers, right? You also expand your ability to disrupt. You can't solve the problem with the same mind that created it, and diversity helps you have access to different thinking and different minds. The moral imperative is, again, as Congressman Trone was saying, it's the right thing to do. What are your passion projects that have social impact? And how can that, I'm going to go back to the business imperative, how can that help your brand? I'm going to leave you with one quick story, and I'll close here. But we do hire people from Harvard. We look at Ivy League schools. We look for excellence. And several applicants said to me that they are walking into organizations these days and they are saying, if you don't have a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, we're out of here. We're looking for businesses that are really on this wave of what does the culture look like? Where are you moving? And the excellence is actually moving toward meaning and moving away from just some of the maybe old-fashioned ways that we recruit and retain people. So just a couple of things to think about as we not only think about expanding our businesses, but we think about being inclusive as we all join together to recover economically, to recover mentally, and to recover emotionally.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead,
David?
Congressman.
No, I totally associate myself with those remarks, and I think can't stress enough the importance of that diversity and where you really get those different viewpoints. Tonight I've got a call with my Latino advisory board. Last night I had my Muslim advisory board. A couple nights before that, my African American, etc. And we hear those ideas that, we need to hear what's happening in Kashmir, what's happening to the Rohingya rebels, what's happening to the Uyghurs. And by knowing and hearing from the folks that are on the ground, we can be better leaders. And the same way in our business lives, by having that diversity, we'll all look at it so much differently. And as you know, and it's not an accident that 40% of our Fortune 500 came from second generation or first generation immigrants. So we've got to drive our immigration policy in America to open it up and bring in that diversity way, way, way more so. And that's what a long-term fix our giant deficit problem of $21 trillion is getting the smartest folks. Everybody that comes here to go to college should get a path to citizenship. Every person. Folks want to invest here, path to citizenship. Folks want to bring their relatives over from Guatemala, El Salvador, absolutely, path to citizenship. That's how we build a diverse, inclusive country. And to get back on the equity piece just quickly, we have left so many people behind, especially in our African American community, because the delta between equity and Caucasian versus African American, it's almost 8-to-1 on economic equity. And the biggest piece is housing. We've got to figure out ways to get housing ability so they stop paying rent and build equity. And that's really crucial. The new COVID bill that the president signed a couple hours ago has a ton of money in it also that's aimed at the economic inclusion of minorities who just can't get the bank loans, et cetera. So we're all better for that diversity.
No, and I think we saw, I mean, Talia, you mentioned it, the challenges that that communities of color have getting access to capital. And we even saw that with the first round of PPP loans, right, Congressman, where those people had a much more difficult time accessing those funds.
Yeah.
So Anne, do you want to continue on our conversation, or do we want to open up the floor to some of the audience questions at this point?
I think why don't you continue a little bit more, David, and then we'll let the questions build up, and then we can go from there. Okay.
Okay, great. So one of the things that comes up a lot, and clearly we're focused on it at USG, are public-private partnerships to encourage entrepreneurship, particularly in a struggling economy. And so I'm curious, Congressman Trone, if I could ask you this, because you're probably more familiar with both the public and private, to chime in first, but how can public and private entities partner to drive entrepreneurship?
Well, there's no question that government has got to have a piece of this. And we've seen the problems that we have. We've also seen successes with COVID. But this public-private partnership that we've done on the vaccine is it's mind-boggling. Right now, between Pfizer and Moderna, they're producing 10 million vaccines a week, which given it's a 2-dose regimen, that's 5 million more people will get a vaccine every week. We just got J&J approved. That's another 6 million on a 1-dose regimen. So we've doubled it. So literally by May 31, we'll have covered every single American 18 and up that wants a vaccine. By December 31, we'll produce 10 billion vaccines. It's unbelievable. Public, private together, and we see the same thing with NIH. So I'm trying to drive NIH funding, 8-to-1 ROI. That's where the ideas come from, the government investment, then to go into other science, pharma, et cetera. And that's how we're going to maintain our lead, around the world.
Thank you. Talia, if I could come back to you. You said something really interesting earlier about how you were able to pivot your business when the pandemic hit. And then you also commented on pivoting when you were talking about some of the skill sets that are necessary for an entrepreneur. How were you able to pivot your business when the pandemic hit a year ago?
Yeah, so I wasn't very optimistic about when we were going to open up, which was a very good thing. And I typically am an eternal optimist. When March hit, we had tons of clients that were saying, let's cancel things and see where it goes. And I actually began having conversations with several of our partners about whether we open or not, whether COVID happens or not, this wave, we are in the fourth industrial revolution, this wave of being able to connect and collaborate online is going to be a part of our reality. I said, let's pivot now, let's learn now, because what this is showing us, whether at the time in March, we felt that everything would be open by the end of May. I think that was just, and I know that sounds ridiculous now, but I remember that being the thought. And so it was one of those, let's wait and see. And so we scheduled and kept things. We really pivoted to this online platform, online learning, really got partners together to talk about how to get teams and how to get organizations up to speed. And they were really, really grateful for this pivot, because as we got into the thick of it, we were able to keep rolling. And so that was a really huge pivot. For other organizations, so there are three, I think, places that businesses are in. Some businesses are thriving if they've gotten to an industry where you can really thrive during this time. Some businesses are completely, I'll just be frank, are really struggling and or just bombing. And other businesses are still trying to start and just trying to figure it out. If you are in the last two and you're not thriving, one thing, I'm going to just kind of go back a little bit to the public and private organizations. One thing that could potentially happen is there's a theme. We have entrepreneurship, but you can have a lot of learning through intrapreneurship. So intrapreneurship is being an entrepreneur within an organization. And so if public and private organizations can actually think about this idea of building people and teaching entrepreneurship skills, you get the value while they're there. And I think for our purposes, in terms of having great entrepreneurs, you're going to build people that will eventually leave, which may not feel good for the businesses, but I think the value is going to take place of the consequence of maybe losing someone because they're going to create some amazing idea. So I think that those are going to be kind of some critical pivots that we make.
I think that's a really good point. And one of the reasons for the Entrepreneurship Lab at USG is because that skill set, while we normally think of as an entrepreneur as someone who starts their own business, big companies need entrepreneurs within their companies to, pivot just like, you did when the pandemic hit. And Tim, I'm curious, when the world shut down about a year ago, how did that impact your business? And then were there kind of, I'll say, entrepreneurial opportunities that you saw that you were able to capitalize on?
Yeah, so clearly weddings stopped happening when COVID hit. So our whole industry was severely impacted. On the first part of your question, we obviously hunkered down as a business. Now we saw it coming a little bit because we have a bunch of properties in Europe, Spain, Italy, France, that kind of was on the beginning end of the COVID cycle. But nonetheless, it didn't change our reaction. We obviously needed to do two things. One, hunker down ourselves, but two, we really asked ourselves, what can we do as a company to step in to help support our industry at the time? In the US here, we launched a $10 million vendor assistance program to support our small businesses in the wedding industry and helping them through a very, very difficult time. These small businesses that serve weddings, right, they depend on the cash flow and weddings actually happening to survive. And so, we wanted to make sure we did our part, to step in and support the industry during that time. There's a second part of your question. Sorry, David, was
what there entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Were you able to pivot and kind of have is it like a new business idea emerge because of the chaos?
Yeah, we didn't. There wasn't a lot of. I wouldn't say there was new business ideas. What we ended up doing was we just doubled down and focused on the existing innovation that was already going. And in some sense, we had more time to launch it. Right. We just kind of really focused on our North Stars, where we wanted to be, continued down our path. And, we were able to ship new products and features during the past year, which, still even today, weddings are not back to normal right now, but we're really bullish on the fact that, that continued innovation that has been part of our spirit will see the light of day when things get back to normal.
Great. And Congressman, can you tell us a little bit about how Total Wine and More, or Total Beer and Wine shifted during the pandemic?
Yeah, no, there are a number of different things. I mean, first of all, we had to pivot to get everybody out of the office. We got 650 folks there, and we had to move them out. And two, we had to get our people in the stores, those 10,000 plus there, safe. So we moved really, really early on with gloves, with the cleaners, we bought more plexiglass before anybody thought even about plexiglass, and really changed how the store looked to a safety first. Then we began contract tracing immediately. So if somebody had been near exposed, we probably had 40 people running the camera systems that's all over the country. And then we would track if somebody had been exposed, take them out for 14 days. We paid 100% of their pay, got them isolated so we could all be a family and be well. And I think that was really important. So folks, if they might have been exposed, they stayed home and we paid them. And that was key. Then we also had to change the business model because it was crystal clear folks didn't want to go into a big box that's high volume. So we really went hard into digital. Luckily, we've been investing heavily in digital, So I took about a $200 million business in digital up close to $1 billion on a run rate now. So it was a major investment in contactless curbside, which we were playing with but not executing well, and drove that across the country, drove delivery across the country. Sometimes it's DoorDash, it's Uber, it's you name it. I mean, it's 10 different vendors. So we've been playing with all of them, Instacart, et cetera, GoPuff, to understand what's the best way to market, and a lot of our own trucks. We probably own 100 trucks now. So in many states, we're the driver. So now it's software for deliveries, software for picking. So we really had to change a lot of our priorities and push them back to 2022 and move up the new priorities that were going to be customer centric, given the new world that we could see was coming fast and hard and not likely to change anytime soon.
Thank you. And I can see in our chat room, we have quite a number of questions. So why don't we turn over to some of the audience questions. Anne, would you like to walk us through some of those?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dave. We have some great questions that are coming up. So there are a number of questions about mentors. People want to know, what role does mentorship play, or a close mentor play, in launching a business and a successful business? Anybody can jump in who'd like to take it.
I'll start off. Just my experiences, they've been very, very meaningful in my entrepreneur experience. I think about mentors and what you gain out of them. Two things. Number one is, really help me. Just the act of wanting a mentor helps one go through what do I want, right? It's a clarifying moment of what am I seeking for, and what can someone help me with, versus I just need a mentor for the sake of having a mentor. So I think that's a first good step. The second is, I think, a lot of good business, and this is quite frankly what a lot of investors are excel at, right? Is they're good pattern recognizers. And they've seen the movie many, many different times in different ways with different things. And that's exactly what I search for in mentors a lot is, I don't need to make the same mistake that many other folks have. And that's why I enjoy mentoring others as well. I can, go on for days about the mistakes that I've made. And I'd love to just sort of pay that forward so that, a budding entrepreneur doesn't need to go through that same experience. So I'm a big fan of mentors, really been instrumental in helping me sort of develop as an entrepreneur.
Talia.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, for those that are listening, that there are two, I think, support people that we can think about. So mentors, how they're defined, as someone that's actually walked the path before you, and they can share their experience, they can share their strength, they can share their hope. That's really critical, because what great vision is in mentorship. There also is, of course, coaching. And I think that people need to make a distinction between that. So the mentorship can give you, kind of help you with the vision, help you see what's there. The coach can help you stay accountable and to think through what you need to do on a regular basis, so that you can start to achieve your goals in a very meaningful way. So as you think about getting a mentor, you always need mentors. I think you always need coaches. But really think carefully and deliberately about where your challenges are. And right now at this space, as you're pivoting, as COVID is happening, what is it that you really need? What kind of advice, what kind of support are you looking for? And then seek out that support that will really drive you in that. I've had lots of mentors, but I also have had lots of coaches. And I take a lot of responsibility for how I use this support and in what stages in the growth of our firm.
I think all those points are right on, and we really, really believe in mentorship at our company, from the whole way down to cascade it right down. I mean, the last decade, my job has really been I talk about it all the time, a teacher, a coach, a mentor. That's what I do, laying out the vision and how we're going to all get there as a team, and explaining the why. You got to tell people why we do it. Don't tell them do it. Tell them why we do it, so they own it. Then we own it together, and then they can improve on what ideas we had. And we've got to get folks comfortable to make mistakes and to fail. We actually measure that in different categories, different silos, because we need more mistakes. Because if we don't get them, they're not pushing the ceiling high enough, and we're not getting any home runs or triples. We're getting a lifetime of singles. So we've got to get people to push, be uncomfortable, And then when we make it, we say, no big deal. Let's move on.
That's great. Thank you all so much. David, did you want to add anything about mentors?
Well, I was just nodding my head to the congressman. I always think about, certainly as an entrepreneur, you're either going to strike out or hit a home run, and that's what you're trying to do. And then how quickly you can get back up to the plate, right? So you strike out 3 times in a row, just getting back up there and keep swinging away. So thank you, Ann.
Sure. So we have a number of questions from students who are eager to know what they can do to distinguish themselves or to be able to step up and prepare to be an entrepreneur. Some questions are related to what can they do during their time here at USG to prepare for being a strong entrepreneur, and what are things that they can do to stand out as well. So speaking from a student perspective, what kind of advice do you have for our USG students?
Happy to jump in too here. One of the things that I admire about folks on my team, and just even thinking back to early days, is and not by design, but just in reflection, we ended up hiring a lot of I don't know if you guys heard this term, this T-shaped people, and it's not just where they're where you're really good deep on one particular skill set. You are, but you sort of have cross-functional awareness around the things that you're going to touch, which make you more impactful. It's a little bit of a expertise, but a little cross-functional athlete as well too. So as an example, if you're a UX designer, and you're really good at that, understanding search engine optimization or paid marketing campaigns, just knowing enough about it or in product principles will just make you a more attractive and, I think, sort of accelerator, particularly in the early startup phase, right? You're not just flush with people. Everybody wears many different hats, and this sort of T-shaped notion, to me, I think, as particularly as a student going through, just grab that experience that's not just in your discipline, but see how it merges, with everyone around you.
Talia?
I'd like to add to that. So analogy I like to use is that you have to be both an eagle and a cheetah. So the eagle is in the sky, mastering the sky skills. So that includes, what are your values? What's your vision? Any education opportunity, it's your opportunity to figure out what's important to you and to ask the question, what can I do even today or at this time, this moment in time to, give the best to the world? What can I do to solve a problem? So the sky skills are about the vision and kind of seeing the big picture. And then you've got your ground skills. And so I like to say you leverage your strengths and you respect your weaknesses. So as you are starting to become any kind of educational journey, you're really figuring out, where are my strengths? How can I leverage those? Where are my weaknesses? And you can work with those, but respect it by really honoring what it is that you need to do to master what's on the ground, what's in front of you. And those are all the technical skills that are required in terms of entrepreneurship. What I find with entrepreneurs is that most people are either too far in the sky and they don't come down to the ground enough. And then some people are too in the ground because they're so into what they do. This is, I don't want to be biased, but a lot of in technology sometimes is you start to just look on the ground and you're not thinking about the vision or thinking about the pivots. And so there's a balance, which how much time you need to spend on the ground, and then when do you need to soar and see what the bigger picture is. And I'll just add one more thing, because we're talking about COVID and this transition. The bigger picture also involves, your mental and emotional wellness, your passion, your happiness. That's also in the skies. You might have a great idea, but if you're working with people you're not enjoying, if you're doing something that don't kind of reach you, then you may need to reassess the sky and then figure out what you need to do on the ground so that you can begin to honor your elevation to the sky.
I think there are both Tim and Talia are dead on there, and I look at it, both of those ideas. It's a similar, different terminology, and I always talk. I'm flying at 30,000 feet as a CEO, but I've got to have the ability to hit the ground, get into the weeds, and spend some time really to show people that this is how you get solutions. Sometimes you roll up your sleeves, get your hand dirty, get into the minutia, and then get the hell back up to 30,000 feet and let them pick it up and roll. But to Tim's point, if you're going to be a CEO, you got to be a generalist at some point. You've got that strength area that and say I'm a marketer, but I've got to know finance, I've got to know tech, I got to know supply chain. So you've got to get out of your comfort zone and into those areas where you're just not feeling that good, but you've got to go there, because to be the leader, the CEO, or the entrepreneur of your own business, where you got to run every silo, you've got to be uncomfortable and generalize.
Yeah. David, I've got a question specifically for you in the chat box, but I'm wondering if you want to add to this question about the USG student and distinguishing themselves or preparing themselves.
Well, I think, I'm going to steal what Talia said about the sky skills. I like that terminology a lot. And I guess I would offer the students this piece of advice, which is use your sky skills now. And that is to be incredibly aware of what's going on in your life. Because most entrepreneurs that I've met, they've started their business because they're working for a company and they think they can do it better. They see an opportunity, or they see a problem in their life. Tim's got a great example about when he was trying to start his wedding, right? Or plan his wedding. And so if you're aware of this, then you can start to address the problems. And then I think also what Tim said, recognizing when you're passionate about something. If you find yourself continually chewing on it and thinking about it, well, then that's likely something that you should pursue.
That's great. Thank you all. What great insight for our students. Love the eagle and the cheetah metaphor as well. It's fantastic. Thank you so much. David, there's a question for you, but I hope everyone will join in as well. And it builds, Tim, on one of your responses about investment and finance. A student wants to know, David, what do you recommend for financing a business? Do you self-finance? Do you get investors? Do you go to the bank? What has been your experience, and what do you recommend is the question from
I would tread incredibly lightly when it comes to taking in outside money. And the reason I asked him the question about how long did you wait to take money is because clearly the investors all have different interests than the entrepreneur. So the longer you can kind of bootstrap it, kind of what our congressman was saying about how he built the store and the coolers, and you're probably not a lot of outside money in that initial store. And then clearly the first round should be friends and family. Where's the network that you can leverage to help fund some capital expenditures before going to the more formal, kind of venture capitalists, which will have much more onerous terms. And I've been part of many organizations and been exposed to entrepreneurs who have entered into agreements that they deeply regret later because of some of the terms that they've agreed to, and they've given up kind of their dream to an outside firm. So I'd offer that, but I'd be curious to hear the panelists' thoughts on that subject as well.
I would jump on that one. I mean, I think what you said, David, is absolutely spot on. And, I never took a dollar of outside funding. And it's, again, decide if you want to suck it up for the short term. And you just got to suck it up, and you're not buying a new car. You're not going to buy a new anything. And you're just going to put every dollar back in the business. And I think I bought my first new car in 1990, and I've owned 2 new cars in my life. And the bottom line is I fed it back in the business, and that's what gets you, the ability to not take in those outside investors and have the long-term valuation that would be remarkably different if I had a $5 billion business and I only owned part of it. And so it's waiting for the long term, and something young folks aren't good at, and I wasn't so good at it then either, but being patient and saying, I'm playing the long game. And here in Congress, holy cow, it's all about the short game here. What a train wreck. I mean, nobody's thinking down the road. They're just about today, and that is wrong for our country. And so we're trying to bring a little bit of business thinking to Congress, because the old joke is there's not much business can learn from Congress, but there is a lot Congress can learn from business.
Thanks. Tim, I saw you nodding a little bit on this question. Do you want to add something to this as well?
No, I mean, I agree with all. If you can stick it out and have the fortitude and resiliency to do that, that's absolutely the path. If you have to go find capital, again, just my earlier comments, pick the right person. And there's lots of money sitting on the sidelines. That's not the issue. There are all of the different investors, as David mentioned, come with different, the alignment and vision and all that are going to be the most important things, because you're going to have a lot of ups and downs. It's inevitable. So if you have to go down that route, really do spend time to just make sure you're getting the right partner by your side.
Talia, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I am definitely not an expert in capital, because I did do it the old-fashioned way, which we provided services, and as you got more money, you grew, and you got more money, you grew. So that was the piece. But I would like to offer, it's a very complicated decision. And I think that there's a model people can use. Let me give it to you really quickly. You have you at the top of the triangle, you have them at one side of the triangle, and it on the other side of the triangle. You is who you are and where you are in your life and what you need. Can you actually survive with a business and without having capital? Them is who do you know and what relationships do you have. So you might be in a situation where you don't have family or friends, and really the ability for you to even get on the board requires some level of capital. And then it is what kind of business do you have? Is it a service business? Is it a product business? Some businesses can absolutely go with a minimally viable product. You can make your money, you can expand. Other businesses, you're not going anywhere if you don't have a certain amount of capital. It'll be dead before it even leaves the door. And so I think that even though you may have to give up something in the long run, it's a complicated kind of decision to make some of those choices. And looking down the line, I just want to say that something was said here that's critical, which is Congressman Trone said this, and Mr. Blair said this, is that moving down the line, did you get the right counsel and what were the terms, right? So that was really important. Those are two very important pieces. Looking down the road, what were the terms, so that you can make a very informed and strategic decision based on you, based on who you know, and based on what your business needs to grow.
Thank you, Talia. Talia, I'm gonna come back to you with another question that's in the chat box because of what you just said about more services, you grew, you got some more money, you grew. The question is, what are the factors that are most important for scaling your business? And so your example seems to be spot on for thinking through that question.
Well, and I think the other panelists will probably also be great to answer this, but I'll just share a little bit of my perspective. And there was another question that I'll combine in this, a question about the difference between leadership and entrepreneurship. Leaders drive, motivate, and lead people. Entrepreneurs build businesses and also build systems. So scaling is really about the system of efficiency. One thing that is interesting about COVID is that we all got a scaling test or a technology test and a systems test. So is your system able to pivot and be agile enough to survive an evolving business landscape? So when we think about scaling, I like to do this little exercise, and I actually got this advice from a mentor. I was actually on an airplane, and this is a gentleman that built $1 billion business. Wish I'd been on an airplane with you, Congressman Trone. I think we would have had a great talk.
Probably would have had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we would have had a lot of fun. But this particular businessman, he said that he likes to work backwards. So, whatever your business wants to be. So let's take a $5 billion business. What does your business look like functioning at that $5 billion mark? And then tell the story. What happened between where you are now and where you want to be that allowed you to function at that big level? And that will give you some insight into maybe what direction you want to go in scaling. Literally, all the models and systems we came up with was doing that very exercise, because I realized very early on, I'm like, we couldn't survive if we doubled right now. But again, it's kind of a mental exercise that people can do to sort of help figure out what the scale might look like for your particular business.
Dead on. And people, again, go back to people every single time. So if you're at 5 billion, I'm hiring a CFO that's going to get me to 10. So not yesterday's CFO, tomorrow's CFO. And we got to do that across the board with all of our team.
So yeah, one of the quotes that I've heard that I really like is proceed as if success is inevitable. And that that forces you to hire in advance. You need to hire them before you need them. Otherwise, you'll be behind the curve.
I want to take a moment here though to recognize. I mean, certainly for the people answer is 100% on. It is one of the most frequent questions I get from solo entrepreneurs is, how do I find that partner? Like, I need X, and it is a real challenge because those first couple of hires, it can really set you on a different trajectory. And I think a lot of folks struggle with that, right? Finding that first, second, third, fourth, fifth, partner that's really going to be in the foxhole with you, that can complement, can do all the things, and sort of ladder up to the vision and ambition that you have. And that's I hear that a lot as a constant theme, but it is the most important thing coming out of the gates. There's just no doubt about it.
Thank you all. We have a question from a participant who is thinking more about the challenges that we're facing, particularly during COVID, but these are challenges we've been facing for a long time. Kids are really struggling right now, kids across the board, and not being able to be in classes. A lot of kids don't have the technology. The mental health strains are tremendous for everyone, but especially for the children. And teachers are overloaded trying to meet all the needs. And the question is, what can we do in terms of partnerships, in terms of entrepreneurial thinking, to start to address the tremendous strain of the human toll of COVID, but thinking forward, the kind of community and country we want to be going forward as well, to address these challenges. Can you share some entrepreneurial thinking about how we dig into these problems in a really creative way?
Well, I'll just jump in first with some observations and turn it over to the panelists. I mean, Tim, you mentioned you like tech-enabled businesses coming out of COVID. As we think about the mental health crisis that candidly we've been in and will continue to, which is only exacerbated based on the crisis, telehealth, right? So investing in telehealth type services, we have found that individuals can get just as an effective treatment through a therapist on an online app like this as they can in person. And of course, therapists are incredibly expensive. But with telehealth, you have the opportunity that you can dial up a therapist perhaps in a cost that a region has a lower cost. Perhaps they speak a different language, right? So you could dial up any language you want. And so as we think about mental health and getting out of this crisis, I'll go back to what Tim said about how can we leverage technology to provide cost-effective solutions.
Yeah, I think David's dead on technology is the key. I mean, one of the biggest problems that's been exposed with this COVID is the lack of broadband for the whole United States. I mean, that is why my rural parts of my counties are just the haves and the have-nots are getting more split. In the urban deserts, it's the same problem. So we need to get that $100 billion bill legislation, which will be in the infrastructure package, which we'll address next. Now this package is done. So that $1.5 trillion infrastructure is coming in. That'll be $100 billion. That's going to pass. It's not negotiable. And it's going to change America, where all of a sudden you can live in rural America and telework fast, efficient. And people have seen that now, and a lot of them are going to stay there. But as David said, that telehealth and telemental in particular, home run, that's going to help drive healthcare costs down. And the teleeducation train wreck of what's happened, where our haves and have-nots have been so pulled apart. I mean, our children, I was talking to the appropriations chair last night, Rosa DeLaura, about legislation. We need to think about our kids who can't express their anxiety, their depression, their isolation, and they've had a year of looking at a keyboard. I mean, yeah, I'm sick of looking at Zoom, but they're looking at a keyboard and they're, 8 years old, 12 years old, and this is really going to put a tough nut on top of young people. And so we've got to address this. We don't have the professionals. We got to get more folks and psychiatrists, social workers, way understaffed across the country. The pay is too damn low and the work is hard. So as Nancy said the other day, or the speaker did on a call just last week, is that we got to stop working around the edges on mental health. We just got to hit it head on. And I mean, depression's gone from 11% to 37% of what people have felt, depression or anxiety, in the last 30 days. That's unbelievable.
Go ahead, Talia. You go ahead first.
I just was going to quickly say I'm so glad for this question, because I think it's just such a difficult thing for everyone. And just to kind of bring a little bit of an entrepreneurship spin to this, is that for those of you starting businesses, we need you, because people need jobs, and people need people that are going to build cultures where, parents are children's support system. And I think it's not just Zoom and access to mental health services and being deprived of friends, but it's also a lot of parents are under a tremendous amount of stress, both financial stress, stress in other areas of their lives. And so you will see the impact on children, because the people that they rely on the most just don't have the energy to show up. So I've actually been encouraging, and I hope that all of us here are thinking about, as we're putting expectations on people, we can set expectations, but we have to have empathy, and we have to figure out a way to really be patient during this time, and not diminish people and not demoralize them, because this is an unprecedented, very difficult situation. And I'll just say this last thing. Everything is connected, right? So when we're unhappy at work, we don't have jobs, the children are impacted. And when the children are impacted, then other things go awry. So it's just all a circle. And so every little thing that we do, we have to look at how it's impacting the entire system. So that's just something that as entrepreneurs we can do: create a culture and hire people, right? So we can start to change some things.
Thank you, Talia. David, you were going to make another point?
So I was just, so Talia hit on a couple of things I was thinking about, but I'll just share this I'll connect two conversations that we've had. One about raising capital, and then about technology and how we've shifted as a country. 80% of capital that's invested in new businesses is in 4 small regions in the United States. And I'll give you a clue. One of them is not here in Montgomery County. But with technology now, I'm hopeful that will change, right? Because it won't be that you need to be in Silicon Valley to start this type of company. We can leverage this technology and other forms, so that hopefully we'll see a more equitable distribution of capital around the nation.
Thank you all for your responses to that. So there's a question that's asking about how you see the differences, or how you see the complementarity of entrepreneurship and leadership. The question is, can you reflect on that? Are they the same, or is there a difference? Is one a reflection of the other? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So Talia, you have to go first on this one. This is like right in your wheelhouse.
Yes. I shared a little bit on it because I saw that message come through. So it's an and proposition, not an or, right? So leadership, as I shared earlier, is really about leading people. Leadership is about motivating people. Leadership is about really thinking about the psychology of people. And by the way, for entrepreneurs, I know we spend a lot of time sort of mastering our craft, which is really important, but it is a great investment in mastering the psychology of what really drives people. Congressman Trone was talking about this idea of start with your people, HR. But as a leader, can you get up and can you really motivate people and get people behind a vision? That is what leadership is about. Also, what are your values? What's important to you? And does your team know what behaviors and what choices align with those values? So that's leadership. Entrepreneurship, once again, you have your sky skills and your ground skills. And I do want to say that there is a leadership hat and entrepreneurship hat, and I have to toggle those. So I really care about my people, but I also look at my company as a juridical person. So it's its own person. So it's health, it's wellness, and that means that the money has to come in and the money has to go out, and profits have to be made, and growth has to happen. Just like you raise a child, you raise a business. And so sometimes you have to make hard decisions that are best for that particular individual, that person, the juridical person of the business. And it may be in conflict sometimes to some of your leadership decisions with your people. And so again, sometimes they're one and the same and they can mix together, but you may have to put two different hats on because you do have to take care of your vision, and you have to also take good care of your bottom line, because the bottom line is the thing that is going to energize your vision. So really critical.
Yeah, I just add that there's, as you said very well, they're just totally intertwined, but I just look at it kind of simply. Entrepreneurship is about ideas, and then leadership is about selling those ideas to our team and our customers. We win.
Great. Tim or David, do you want to add anything else?
I was just gonna say one thing that I've observed to a leader. Just this is on the leadership topic. Certainly when you're a smaller company, there's and an entrepreneur, right? Hands on the dials, really deep in the weeds on things, and then the layers start coming in. You hire managers and then directors and VPs. And for me, one of the observations that I've come to learn over time is the skill of leading through other people versus leading directly, and that sort of comes as you build as you scale and build your company. That becomes an even more and more important skill to master, and certainly one that is incredibly important as things scale up.
So I'm going to ask one more question in the chat box, and then David, I'll turn it over to you again. The questions have been rolling in, so my apologies if I haven't captured everyone's questions. There's a question about incubators, and this is from an E-fellow at University of Baltimore, asking, what do you think about incubators? Are they an essential part of entrepreneurship? What are your thoughts?
I'd throw that out to the panel. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I did not use incubators when I started my company, so I'm not that familiar with their effectiveness. And I'm curious, Tim, Talia, David, do you have direct experience with incubators, and what do you think?
I'm going to pass.
I'm happy to jump in. I didn't use them myself, but I've heard very good things in general. I mean, if you just sort of step back, it's the programs that I'm familiar with. It's a bunch of entrepreneurs, small businesses. You put them all together. You try to surround them with mentors / coaches, maybe a little bit of funding, right? 10 grand, 20 grand, just to get you started, and you kind of hope that those ingredients, give you a little better chance of success. Just being surrounded by other folks that may be doing things entirely different, having a little bit of a support network and a little infusion of capital kind of gives you a little better chance of success. I think that's the thesis behind them. Generally, I've heard pretty good things about that part of the stack. As I haven't really tracked, what the overall success rate of them coming out, but the thesis to me makes sense.
I'll just chime in really quickly on this. So my son was a part of an incubator, and he is launching an app and doing really, really well. I think that any opportunity to be able to practice and do simulations or work on sort of the identity of being an entrepreneur, I think is very helpful. I agree with the rest of the panel. I'm not sure about the effectiveness, but I would suspect, and I probably feel like I could confidently suspect this just based on how things go, that these programs are probably fantastic for building the pipeline and the introduction into entrepreneurship, because I think many students that engaged. My son was a founder in an incubator, but I thought it was very interesting that he got to lead a team, and the team members were supportive of an idea that they didn't start, but they were interested in being entrepreneurs. So you got to learn how to follow, and you had an opportunity to lead. So I suspect that also helps people decide whether or not they want to embark on this very challenging journey of entrepreneurship as well. So I think you all are not surprised my take on it. Any opportunity for learning and any opportunity to be able to try out something seems like it would be a great investment of time, depending on where you are in your life and your journey.
Great.
So thank you all. David, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Anne. And so just a heartfelt thank you to our panelists, to Talia, and Tim, and Congressman Trone for carving out some time today to share with us. a little bit about your stories and how you were able to start your businesses and be successful. And there's no doubt that the group joining us today benefited from that. I'd also like to thank the entire team at USG for putting this on, coordinating it, and thank you for all of your efforts. While we didn't hear directly from Mark Starin, our founding director, he's been clearly an instrumental part to our success. And if you're interested, there's a really great couple pages on our USG website that describes the Entrepreneurship Lab in greater detail. So again, thank you. And Ann, I'll turn it back over to you for closing remarks.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Congressman Trone, Tim, Talia. You all are amazing. And my takeaway what I heard today, in addition to all the great advice and business insight and acumen, was people first. People first in how you grow your business, build a successful business, and really engage in a meaningful way, in a thoughtful way in the world and make a difference. So thank you all so much for your remarkable talents and for spending time with us today. And David, thank you so much for hosting, and thanks to our USG team as well.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.